Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So today I'm going to show you how I made several different types of bread for my dolls. The ladies have been doing quite a bit of work over the winter time after the harvest with all the fresh fruits and vegetables, canning, and baking bread for the long winter. So I want to show you what they made. Now I started with several neutral tone clays, including a rich deep chocolate brown, a tan, a orange, and a kind of more of a dough color. Now this is a nice piece of pumpernickel loaf that I cut in half. And I just cut off a couple slices so I could texturize it on the inside. And I did texturize both slices on both sides and the two ends. Now to create the texture on the outside or the surface of my bread, I just use a balled up piece of aluminum foil. I think it creates a very realistic texture for my bread items. You can make your impressions as deep or as shallow as you like. Now, after I was done with that part, I used the tip of my needle tool to make the little holes or the texture inside the body of the bread. Now, depending on how many loaves of bread you make and how many slices you want to texture on the inside, you will need to give yourself some time. Without a doubt, this is edited video, and it took me a lot longer to do this than what you see in these frames. Now make sure if you decide to do slices that you're mindful to texturize both sides and the surface of the slices, because smooth bread would look weird. And in this frame, I'm just allowing you to watch me add the texture to the slices. And here again on the half of the loaf, I'm adding the texture to the outside and then inside the body of the bread where I sliced it. So I really like to make all of my items at once, bake everything, and then detail them in the end. So let me show you how I shaped some of my other loaves of bread. Now, I have several different shades, as I mentioned in the beginning. And I'm shaping this one out to just be one of those general like baguette-like loaves. Now, after I shaped that one out, I took another piece of the same colored clay and packed it inside this loaf pan and allowed some of it to spill out a little bit. Now, I did put baby powder inside or talcum powder inside the container so that the clay wouldn't stick. And then I just used one of my tools and just pressed like a trench down the middle of it to give it that loafy look. And after I was satisfied with the shape of it and everything, I went on to take my little aluminum foil ball and run it across the top to shape it a little more and texturize it at the same time. Now, I can't bake this bread in this loaf pan because it's actually plastic. This is a little Prison Bond loaf pan. And when I felt satisfied with the amount of texture I added, the powder allowed me to lift it straight out of the pan without sticking and set it aside so I could bake it with the other breads. Then I took another piece of the same colored clay and rolled out another one of those baguette-shaped loaves, and I keep testing it to make sure it'll fit inside the basket I want to use. Popping it inside the basket every once in a while helps to make sure that I keep things within scale for my project. And after I felt comfortable with the shape and size of the bread, I used my needle tool to create those dents in the body of the loaf. And then I tried it inside my basket one more time. Now I did several baguette loaves with different colored clays, and I used that part of my brush tool to create texture on the bottom. And it must be the baking rack that creates that interesting texture that's on the bottom of baguettes. Now, dolls, feel free to make any type of bread you like. I'm overly acquainted with bread and bread products, anything made with yeast requiring baking. I'm very well acquainted, so I'm working straight from memory. But using pictures or images as reference while you're working is an excellent tool to help keep you on track. But this is really a fun activity, and it really adds a lot to your kitchen to have fresh bread on the stove, or even a bag or basket of fresh biscuits and bread with a nice hunk of butter and a knife, or even some bread in your bread box. So even if you're not really fluid in making a lot of different polymer clay food, a few simple biscuits and a couple loaves of bread really go a long way to enhance or cozy up the look of your kitchen or pantry. Now, in addition to doing solid colored clay loaves, go ahead and play around with the different colors and textures of some breads and how they look when they bust open while baking. Like with this one, when I broke the surface of the bread to make the cuts in it, I added some lighter tones of clay inside the cuts to give the indication that you could see the center of the bread. And after I added the light clay to the center of the split, I texturized it again and set it aside to be baked along with the other loaves. Now, in addition to my regular loaves, my baguettes, and the pumpernickel, I made a few of what I call muffin breads. And these are supposed to simulate something like pumpkin bread or cinnamon bread or apple bread or banana nut bread. And I used the same loaf pan, but I used a different tone of clay and added quite a bit more texture to the surface just to give it that muffin bread look. And you can clearly see in this frame that I used baby powder so that my loaves wouldn't stick. And after I completed my last couple loaves, I prepared everything to bake. Polymer clay is intended to be baked inside a home oven. Do not microwave it. Follow the baking instructions on the pack of your particular type of polymer clay. Now, dolls, after my little lovely loaves of bread were all baked and cooled, I used an old eyeshadow palette to add a toasty color and look to the bread to bring out the realism. And although I love the shapes and colors of all of my bread, they need to be toasted. And these warm golden colors from this eyeshadow palette are going to do just the trick. Now, I used a little bit. It was a color that was kind of, like I said, an orange golden color. And I rubbed a little bit on all of my loaves. And just like that, with a few swipes of the eyeshadow, you can see how that rich golden color is coming out in the loaves of bread that are actually making it look like it's been baked. Now, you can do as much or as little of this as you like. And after you've added your shadows, play around with it. Especially if you have more than one shade of the brown. Sometimes you want more gold, sometimes you want more brown. And don't worry, if you make a little mistake, you can use a little alcohol to wipe it off and start over. I always truly enjoy detailing my miniatures, and sometime with a project like this, to me it's really exciting how something as simple as a little eyeshadow can be so transformative on a tiny piece of clay. Now this is the one that I split and added the lighter clay down the middle. And look at how you're seeing like three shades of color, the original color, the toasted color, and the light color down the center. I think that looks really warm and realistic. Take your time with this. There's no rush. And again, you can try a little yellow, a little gold, a little amber, because different breads with different type of ingredients will definitely have a different show of color when it's baked or toasted. Now this is a half of a loaf. I'm kind of imagining it sitting on a cutting board with some jam, jelly, or honey next to it. But literally, the possibilities for something like this are endless. Now, this is another one of those loaves that I made all the deep cuts and slices in, and I added quite a bit of texture. And I was really amused by how rich and realistic it looked after I added the eyeshadow to it. All the nooks and crannies on the surface really took to the eyeshadow well. I'm really tickled by how this one came out. Now this is one of the loaves I made in the loaf pan, and it was pretty simple, one of the ones I made the trench with. And I did add quite a bit of texture to the surface or the outside of this one. So it's really taking well to the eyeshadow or the toasting. And I just want to show it to you up close here and just let you really see it. And I want to compare it to one that I made when I didn't use texture for my loaves of bread. Now, this is one I made a while back. It's really cute. I like the color, but it doesn't have any texture to it here. I'm just adding a little extra toasting. And although both of them are cute and I think they could hold their own in any setting, I think the one that's textured does have quite a bit more realism to it. Now, last but not least are my pumpernickel loaves, and they are really nice. And because they have such a nice, deep, rich color, they didn't get a toasty shade to them. I added kind of that powdery, floured look that pumpernickel bread always has. Now, that might not be powder, but that's what it looks like to me. Pumpernickel bread is one of my lifetime childhood favorites, so I had to add it to my collection. Dolls, if you've enjoyed this video today, I sure would like to know in the comments. I really appreciate your kind and encouraging words as I read the comments and respond. And I appreciate that you all are patient with me as I catch up with my backlog. I'm always so delighted to create these videos for you dolls. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time right here on Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.